Welcome to what we hope is a long series of ongoing videos in support of JasperFx software and the Critter Stack as it's known around to the people that have constellated and made a community over this great set of tools. Thought it was only appropriate that in this first video we talk to the founder of JasperFx, the creator of these tools we're all using and loving and growing with, Jeremy Miller. Jeremy has been a part of the .NET community, an influential part of the .NET community, as long as there has been .NET, at least as far back as I can recall. I can remember reading his articles in magazines, his prolific blog, conference talks, and then with the advent of YouTube videos, and I've continued to learn from him over the years. I kind of lost touch with him though a few years ago. Maybe it was the pandemic or whatever, and I had a thought one day, kind of a distraction, where I'm wondering what Jeremy is doing these days, and I started down a Google rabbit hole, and I revisited some of those old talks and some of the old articles in his blog, and had this realization that so much of my view of writing software with .NET, and even what I teach in class, I spend about half my time professionally writing code, and the other time I teach and mentor software developers in a corporate environment. But I realized how much of my own thinking, and frankly, even some of the things I say, are directly taken from Jeremy. Well, this realization led me to his latest efforts, this JasperFx Corporation, that is creating a great set of open source tools, along with support for companies that may need advanced help, aren't really prepared to embrace the full open source model, where they send pull requests for each feature request, and kind of have something they can rely on. And that's really the basis of this conversation, is that line in open source where we want to embrace open source, embrace contributions, but what else is needed when we're trying to use this kind of software in a enterprise environment where we might have fiduciary responsibility to stakeholders, and there's a going concern that the library is just not going to disappear one day. So this is the first video, and we're really hoping there'll be a lot of these in the interview that's coming up here. Jeremy and I share a couple ideas about these. I'm putting together some training materials, things I've used in class myself, starting with Alba and writing good API tests with Alba. And then we're going to progressively walk through the big pieces of the Critter Stack, including Martin and Wolverine. Jeremy has also discussed doing some videos of his own, either as a replacement in some places for his long-running blog posts, but also to dig deeper in and kind of give you the experience of what it's like to work on this amazing set of tools, and point out and maybe even brag a little bit about some of the discoveries and the optimizations he's done along the way. So subscribe to the channel if you can, support us. We're not trying to monetize or anything, but you want to make sure you're notified when new videos come out. Thank you, and here's the interview. So, Jeremy, this is our inaugural, I guess, video podcast and a way to kick off this channel. And I thought it would be a good idea if we got together and just talked a little bit about kind of where you're at and where JasperFx is at, and maybe a little bit of background for people. I am Jeff Gonzalez, and I've known of Jeremy. I've run across him at conferences over the decades of .NET, and really didn't get a good chance to talk to him until the Discord channel for the Critter Stack, and would ask questions there, and he always engages with just about everybody. And then I was at a conference in January, and we got to share a couple beers and have some conversations, and I thought, it would be good because I'm still relatively a beginner with a lot of these tools and kind of figuring these things out, and have got immense support from him and the community as we've done this. And I want to kind of share some of my learning journey on this channel as well in subsequent videos. I'm going to start with one about kind of my entry point into the, I don't know, the modern Jeremy Miller stack, which it would include things like Alba, Martin, Wolverine. I started off with Alba as a testing tool simply because I was really tired of kind of setting up the web application factory for everything. It was just a lot of boilerplate code. And I don't even remember how I stumbled across Alba. Where did that come in the timeline, Jeremy? Was that before some of the newer stuff, Martin and Wolverine?
Okay. So, all of my current tools, about 10 to 15 years ago, was the leader of a huge failed open source alternative web framework called Fubu MVC.
Yeah.
And a little part of that is we had some test helpers we built to test the content negotiation parts of Fubu.
Hmm.
It's a feature that every web framework has to have for bragging rights, but nobody actually
Ever
uses in
uses.
real development. So that was left over, and when the Fubu project failed, um, and that's right when .NET Core had first been ASP.NET Core had first been announced.
Hmm.
So I lifted that little bit of test helpers to ported it first to Owen, that
Yeah.
nobody ever used that, and then ported it to ASP.NET Core as well. Um, and it has grown since to now sit on top of Test Server and Web Application Factory. But the point of it was to have an easy formula for testing HTTP endpoints in process.
Hmm.
So spin up your app on demand,
Yep.
run be able to run the debugger right through it when you need to, be able to deal with all the repetitive code like JSON serialization and
Yep.
whatnot, make the tests as declarative as possible when you're working with the actual HTTP endpoints, and then a little bit later, find ways to work around security so you
Yeah.
can test your app and get things done.
Yeah, it was the security stub thing that totally converted me. I mean, I was into it already, and I think it. What I noticed when I was using it is, despite my, I don't know, my pedigree, like I do test first development. I don't say test driven development anymore, but test first development. When it came to APIs, it was often something I would add in later. And with Alba, the combination of, the just kind of the ease of setting up this scenario, the built-in assertions you have, and the ability to, stub out some of the dependencies that maybe you just haven't gotten to yet. That was always a good, a stumbling block. You could do that with the configure services and all that kind of stuff with the web application factory, but this put it all right in your face. And I feel like that tool really is a good starting point for people getting into the whole JasperFx family, because already latent within that is this experience as a developer where it gently pushes you towards doing the right thing. Every once in a while when I find myself struggling with it, I've learned to like step away from the keyboard for a minute or two and rethink my life. And there's an easier way to do it. And you've kind of thought of that already. And I see that just as much in Martin and Wolverine. I was just working on a project this morning, actually, and doing some things with authentication and trying to take their JOT and convert it to a GUID for their stream. And, it's like, man, I was tying myself in knots. And I just drew a little kind of event sourcing picture, kind of like your blog series on that. Like, oh, when would be the right place for that to happen? And it all fell into place. It was like the tools were there to say, you finally figured it out. And everything worked smoothly from there.
So it's not necessarily figuring everything out. It's putting things out there where people use it, and no matter how much it hurts, responding to the feedback you get. What is
Yeah.
hard? What is awkward? Being able to see now that I have my own company where I'm helping other people use these tools,
Yeah.
see it in more usage, so you can see, oh, that's that's some friction. That's repetitive code. That's Martin's not handling it very well there, and just constant adaptation,
Yeah.
constant little improvements for 8 or 9 years now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I see with the Martin and the Wolverine stuff in particular is, and maybe you're better at identifying this, but it seems like at some point, a line got crossed from this being just a little library you can use if you want to use. You know, like Alba, you could write all that code yourself pretty easily. It just is the
Mm-hmm.
NuGet package description. It supercharges it, it makes it easier. But with the the full critter stack using Wolverine and Martin and all that kind of stuff, it really is kind of holding your more of a framework. It's kind of holding your whole developer experience. And I see your interactions with people on particularly the Discord, some with the GitHub issues and comments, etc., but particularly the GitHub thing. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about. I mean, I think this has to do with you starting your own company. It can't just be 100% supported through open source contributions. I was thinking, there's like a part in Wolverine that I wish was a little more fleshed out for something I'm doing, which is the Kafka transport. And
Oh, mm-hmm.
it's like I kind of dug into the code. I could maybe send a pull request and add some of this stuff in, but it's such a small little corner, and you're supporting this big broad thing. And so I think this support model you have now, where you have customers that are actually paying you to support their instances, their work, etc., helps drive that. And because it's based on kind of real world use cases, we kind of all benefit from it. So I just wonder if you have any thought about the evolution there and why you thought you had to turn this into a company to support it.
Well, okay. So there's two things. The biggest thing is I wanted to. I wanted to do something like this for years. And after wanting to do this for 12, 15, almost 20 years, um, all the stars aligned for me last year where I got to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to some degree, like some of the features that have been built in the past year have been way too complicated to be doing something as a side project, and certainly not
Mm-hmm.
something that would be suitable to support for fun for free off to the
Yeah.
side after normal work hours. Some of the just an example. We have a model. It's not openly available right now, but an early customer is using it that does software. The software powered load distribution, being able to move work around, running agents, being able to move them around on different nodes in a
Yeah.
cluster, doing some balancing. That was a very complicated piece of work to build and test, and it inevitably takes a lot of occasionally hand holding and help to get people to make
Mm-hmm.
the most out of it. That was absolutely not something that was suitable to do as a little toy side project. That was something where that needed to be my day job to even
Yeah.
think about building.
Yeah, I think I work with some pretty large companies, and for them to adopt something like this, it is I was going to say more invasive, but more enabling to the developers to be able to use this kind of stuff. But it also means that it's not just, hey, yeah, you could use this little NuGet package or this little NuGet package. You're really kind of buying into something here. And knowing that there is support available, there's a company behind it, et cetera, and is essential. They couldn't do it otherwise. And I wonder, is just a general conversation thing, the state of open source right now, there's all sorts of things like that going on. What are your thoughts about balancing the open source portion of the critter stack of what you're doing with some of these features that I know you have planned, things like kind of a dashboard for more enterprise environments to maintain multiple servers, et cetera. What is that looking like for Jasper FX in the future?
So, I mean, and Jeffrey says this, know that Jeffrey's deeply involved in this work. Um, so some of this work that is, it's far too complex to build for free.
Hmm.
And then also, it is too complex for a simple user to need. So we're
Right.
going down this kind of common path of freebie OSS core. It'll all be
Hmm.
MIT license for forever, or as long as I'm around. Um, and the paid add-on model for you're into really complex stuff.
Yeah.
Like a recent customer that's engaging with Jasper FX. Um, Good on them. They are about to double the amount of data they have, and they already have a huge amount of data moving through Martin today. Um, there's places where the companies that have more special needs for
Yeah.
scaling or more complicated monitoring needs, to some degree, they are. How would you say, they are subsidizing critter
Yeah.
stack maintenance for everyone else. But even for the OSS core, we're engaging with some customers just purely on the support contracts, which ends up being private Slack or Discord channels, answering specific questions, trying to give some advice on how best to utilize things. It's not necessarily common topics, but things where people hit
Yeah.
complicated multi-tenancy or concurrency problems, and just helping. Here's how to use the tools, and some of it's not necessarily the tools, but here are the development patterns, the messaging patterns, the just how to structure your code to be able to succeed. And,
Yeah.
and that is helping make the critter stack tools a viable choice, because like you said, your big enterprise companies, they don't want to use a Rebel Alliance tool. They want to use something with a company behind it where it's going to be sustained and you could go to for support if you needed to.
Right. Right. And I think, kind of as a follow on when you're working with these companies, I think that for me, it's been in kind of aligning myself with these tools and this way of thinking. And obviously, things like, mediator patterns and event sourcing and all that stuff, you didn't invent that. But for many .NET developers, that really hasn't been our way of thinking about building things like services, APIs, etc. And, for me, that's been a little bit of a struggle is that with the critter stack, with Martin, it's got the document stuff. You can use it as a document database. And I was just looking through a project I've been working on for a year or so and kind of going through the source code history and seeing that pretty much my use of the document store stuff outside of projections and the event sourcing is really kind of drying up and going away. In other
Hmm.
words, that was a nice, warm, fuzzy introduction for me. It was like, okay, I can get my head around this. I'm challenged here. I'm going to use this. But, at each step, the next little piece is there. I can, like, oh, if I just did it this way. And I'll tell you, sometimes when I look at, you're talking about working with these customers with huge data demands, et cetera. Sometimes when I'm looking at the documentation or looking at the comments on the Discord, it's I'm too arrogant to ever have imposter syndrome, but it's more like, wow, what are these people doing? I'm not at that level yet, but there is comfort knowing, and my experience with the tools is when you run up against something, it's already been addressed or it's in the backlog, it's something you're working on, and there's other people that have worked on that too, so I think the big draw in particular for the Discord, which is where I hang out, interact the most, is obviously you're there, some of the other key contributors are there, but I've had a couple times where I've asked a question and it's kind of a, beginner level question, and there's somebody else there that I'll get into a private conversation with, and because they don't
Oh,
want to
good.
talk about it either, and there's always that next thing there. So I'm just kind of pointing out that this model now where I think, as you said, other people are kind of subsidizing the work means those of us that aren't at that level yet are getting great advantage from that. It's like these people are getting experience, the code's there, the patterns are being introduced, and they're just there for us to take advantage of. And I think, that is, one of the key things that's really changed this. I mean, I've been using and following your open source projects all the way back since the structure map days, and the instantaneous communication now with things like, everything from the GitHub issues to the Discord and all that. Like that feeling of community has changed quite a bit. And, from just kind of anonymous comments on an issue on GitHub, there's actual communication. And I'm wondering, there's pros for us on that, but are there cons for you? I mean, I feel like you're always on call there and other members of the team are always on call. Is it a little bit too much sometimes?
It is. It's stressful, and I'm not the best at managing that. I know that I will. And sorry, folks, I'm very sorry. I will let irritation come through sometimes when I'm just a little too overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And again, folks, gentle listeners, Jeffrey is coaching me on this a little bit of when to step away. I mean, there are times when when I've just said, "Hey, folks, I've got to log off and focus. Office hours will resume in a little while."
Yeah.
So folks like me probably need to do a better job of just stepping away. I mean, I feel a lot of ownership over all this,
Yeah.
so I kind of feel like it's my job to answer every question, but it just can't be that way. And I should say we do have community. It's not just me on this one
Hmm.
Discord channel. There are other people that will hop in and answer questions, or sometimes you just want to start a conversation. What's the best way to deploy this? Or I just
Yeah.
want to hear more about other people's experiences. And Discord is Discord is also really good for that kind of thing too.
Yeah, it's a good feedback loop. You get to hear what people are struggling with and kind of what other people are suggesting. I remember there was a question I asked, and somebody that had been using the tools for a while suggested something, and you kind of came in and said, yeah, actually, that's okay what you're doing. It's not such a big deal. But I think it's probably good for all the maintainers to kind of see where the stumbling blocks are for people, what challenges they're running into.
Oh, it's definitely that. It's like I said.
Yeah.
It's you don't sit around and invent everything. You invent some stuff up front. You get it out there in front of people, and then you react to whatever they have problems with or what their real use cases are. And
Right.
most of it's really adaptation.
So, with this channel, you and I have talked about this a bit. There's the Discord, there's obviously the GitHub repositories, there's websites for Wolverine, for Martin, for Alba, there's the JasperFx website. In each one of these tools, you can gain a level of mastery in them in isolation, but they also kind of come together like Voltron or something and make this powerful thing. And I think one of our goals with this channel is to mirror some of the things. You've been a prolific blogger for how many years now? How many
I
years you
don't
been
want to answer
blogging?
that question, but it's multiple decades now.
Yeah, I mean, and
Hey,
the excitement about something new, you go there and write about it, but it's so frequent that sometimes it kind of gets lost. It's the nature of the blogging thing. It's like the next two, I search for something, there's already three new versions of it. So kind of making this YouTube channel a curated place where kind of the current way of doing certain things might appear, mirroring some of the things that you put on your blog. And I think unlike a lot of YouTube channels where the content just stays there forever, I want to do a really good job, working with all of you of making sure if we find better ways to do things, if there's new versions available, we kind of keep it up to date with what's new. Um, and you had talked about maybe doing some little short videos as well, just
yeah.
stopping in, talking about some of these things. I mean, I will say your blog is probably one of, 8 or 9 blogs that I read pretty religiously, but I watch videos way more. And, because it's useful to be able to pause, look at the code, think about it, etc. So I don't know. I was just wondering if you have any other thoughts about what we could do with this channel, and the viewers as well. If you have thoughts, things you would like, you could put them in the comments here.
So, so yes, I've been I will dare say, I have been a prodigious blogger for the last, not most of the last 20 years.
Hmm.
Um, I've also been roundly abused in the last year or two that is a very old school way to do things, and all the cool kids are doing YouTube channels. And if
I
you really
try
want
not to
to,
say it that way.
oh, plenty of other people have. And if you really want to reach developers and get information in front of them in a usable way, you got to bite the bullet and learn how to do YouTube. So
Yeah.
my daughter is usually disappointed when she finds out that this isn't dude perfect, but she really wants me to be a YouTube star. So, but on this channel, I mean, what I would love to do is I would love to have more of these conversations.
Hmm.
Um, like we'll get a mix. We'll see if we can get some of the other Critter Stack core team members to come in and talk. And then,
Fantastic.
I mean, so Jeffrey's already hard at work on some Alba training videos.
Yes.
So let's throw that one in there. And just little tips where maybe it's going to be good to just talk through some small usage. Um,
Hmm.
I tell you the next video I want to try out. So you know that I'm a pretty harsh critic of the clean architecture as it's actually practiced, right? Not the theoretical way it's described in a book where it all sounds nice and fine and dandy, but how people actually do it.
Yeah.
So influenced pretty heavily, inspired pretty heavily by some system I'm helping with right now. And take how something like Wolverine is very optimized for a vertical slice architecture approach, but also show how we can unwind a lot of the ceremony and queen architecture, move towards a VSA, but along the way, we're going to look at how can we actually solve some very significant potential performance problems while also making our code much simpler. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that is going to be my first Jeremy solo outing.
I love it. I love it. And I'll be there with you, probably asking questions because I think it's a big topic, and I think the the advantage, one of the biggest advantages that I'm kind of seeing in my code as I'm leaning more and more towards using these tools is you without a oppressive code organization scheme, it's actually a little chaotic. It's actually more understandable. I can locate things. I can, debugging is easier than it ever has been before. And I think, when I'm working with, I do a lot of training. About half my time is doing training for corporate customers, and I do coding for several other companies and mentoring. And I get a knee jerk reaction from people sometimes. Like one person said, I'm kind of a hippie programmer because I don't have this big intense folder structure. A lot of times I'll throw multiple things in the source code file, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot more to the vertical slice architecture than this, but that oppressiveness of kind of, the institutional way an application source code should look has really, I think, been a huge distraction for a lot of developers.
No, I completely agree with that. One thing I would throw out to folks, about those really strict code organization things. And I can of course go off for hours ranting about style cop and SonarQube and stuff like that. Modern IDEs, I'm a JetBrains writer guy, but Visual Studio as well. Um, they make it very easy for you to move code around later. Um, you can move code around, change the namespaces. It's very simple to write related code, put multiple classes and enums, whatever, put it in one file as you're working on it, and let Writer, Visual Studio, ReSharper spread it around later. But don't let that code organization file structure nonsense get in the way of you being able to think and work through problems. Um, yeah, and I'm struggling a little bit. I'm helping with a code base they have different stylistic opinions than I do. Nothing that's the slightest bit important, but it's just different and very strict style cop rules. So I spend I spend a little too much time fighting with style cop um, or for me, I get real whiny with markdown linting. Um, and I'm like, do you really care if there's an extra trailing space at the end of a file? Does it really matter? Why are you breaking my build? That kind of thing.
I like the style cop stuff. I don't really use it anymore. Some of the Roslyn analyzers, like I just started turning on the one that will warn you if you forget to pass along the cancellation token. That's fantastic. That kind of stuff is fantastic. But anyhow, yeah, I think this will be a good talk for another video to kind of go through and remember what it is to actually just write code before you worry too much about how are we going to make this look pretty for everybody else. And I think getting your head around it is the most important thing. Maybe it's my age too, to tell you the truth. Maybe my brain's just getting smaller and I can't organize this stuff in a way I can find it all.
You know what? Another way to think about this is you want coding to
Yeah.
be at the speed of thought. That the limiting factor in how fast you're writing code is
Hmm.
how fast you can think. And anything that's kind of mechanically in the way, that's mechanically awkward, of I have to go over here, I have to open this folder, I have to edit these different places. Anything like that's
Yeah.
friction. That's slowing you down.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like your libraries, your frameworks here are like sandpaper for friction. And I do run across some people that almost miss that abrasiveness. Like I got in an argument with somebody that's like, I absolutely want marker interfaces for my commands and my events. And I'm like, you don't need those with these tools. You can do it if you want. And I kind of gently challenged him to explain
Hmm.
why he wanted those and really couldn't come up with an explanation. It was just that's what you do in .NET. That's what we did in Java. That's what you do in .NET. And,
Yeah.
and then other people I'll show code with this or code along with them. And it doesn't even dawn on them for a little while. Like, wait, how is this working? The code actually makes sense, but it's so low noise, so low ceremony. They kind of have that, as the alcoholics say, that moment of clarity. Like, this can't actually be working. This is magic. And I'm like, well, kind of, but it's the kind of magic that actually makes your application perform better. And I think that would be something I'd be really interested in a future video about, kind of that actual runtime, that compile time, code weaving, and maybe not a deep dive because I think that would make us all crazy, but just some lessons learned from you and how that relates to. I was thinking about this morning. I mean, you'll probably blush, but Jeremy, you're kind of responsible in the .NET space for things like IOC containers and that way of thinking. I mean, it came from other places, but most of us .NET developers were using your tools, and now, of course, .NET Core, that's the architecture, but there's performance issues with doing that kind of stuff. And somehow with your tools, you get all that advantage and you strip that stuff out in a way that there's no, I set up my services collection and it's static as long as my application's running. So why are we using dynamic service location? And you've kind of solved that with some of this stuff.
Sure.
Would you be interested in doing that sometime?
Sure. I would, because that'd also be a way to show off some low level stuff, that to be able to press upon folks, hey, there's
Yeah.
some serious thought into this because it's not obvious from usage. So again, to the point of everything's failing, learning, adapting. The predecessor to Wolverine was extremely bad about object allocations and deep stacks and just truly
Right.
massive
Right.
stack traces. Yeah, after it failed, I had some time of just to reflect on, hey, if I ever did try it again, what would I do differently? And Wolverine benefits from that. How to drastically reduce object allocations by making the IOC container go away. How much can you inline by using code
Yeah.
generation to inline a lot of code? So you want to minimize runtime
Yeah.
if then logic. Yeah, I'd
I
love to
think we
show
need
that
a new
off.
playlist,
And it's also
the
just a
low
great kind
level
of
performance stuff. Yeah,
micro
just because maybe
optimizations.
not everybody's interested, but I
Yeah,
think that would be really cool stuff to dig into with you. Are you making a note here?
yeah.
Let's do it. Very good. So, is there anything else you want to say on this inaugural video? Yeah, I have some videos in the can to help people get started with Alba, and it kind of ends at a little bit of an awkward place that is designed to say, look at this weird code, and let's start adding in some of the other pieces of the critter stack, Martin and Wolverine, and see how that cleans it all up and makes it better, all while the tests are still passing. So, we'll get those out in the next few days, right at the same time as this or soon after. And yeah, in the comments, if people have things they want to see, questions they want to ask, I'll put the links to the Discords and the websites and all that in the description, and probably flash them on the screen. But Jeremy, you can have the parting words here.
No, hey, just Jeffrey, thanks for doing this with me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we can do about this, and just to catch up with all the other cool kids, thinking about all the cue boy looks that everybody does in those videos. Um, I don't, I don't- you know, um, I think we might
Yeah,
skip that,
please.
but we're going to try for really good technical content, and I'm wide open for suggestions. This is all new to me, so.
I'm looking forward to it.
And maybe we'll do trick shots. Maybe we'll put a basketball hoop up here and
I
do
think that
some
can be
dude
in the low
perfect.
level channel. We'll come up with some graphics for that. And maybe one day your daughter will be impressed.
Maybe,
Yeah,
but
my
it's not
experience
going to
with
be
my
this
kids is
day.
it never happens, but we can try. All right, sir. Thank you very much. I'm excited to get going with this.
Thank you, and check back the channel soon. There'll be
Excellent.
more,
Thanks a
hopefully
lot.
soon.